I've been watching Monster Bash from the very beginning when Trent first started the collaboration project, so I'm so excited to say that I'm going to be involved this year and making my very own Monster Bash. I'm just over the moon to be a part of it, and I hope you enjoy the video because when I'm recording this intro I haven't started yet. I have no idea what I'm going to make. So enjoy, because whatever I make will be just as much a surprise to me as it will be to you. What is Monster Bash, you may ask? Well, what happens is a group of creators get together and each randomly draw 6 cards from this deck of 300 or so monster parts, body bits, and some just absolute chaos, and then you use those cards as inspiration to make a monster. So first things first, we hopped onto a video call to draw our cards together.
2, 1, and go! Oh no. Ooh!
Extremely long legs.
Extremely long legs. I think, is that
Bunny
chastity belt?
Oh, I got the sponge hand.
Oh.
I got the sponge.
Oh, you got the freaky little dude!
So what cards did I draw? We got this cool skull, which looks alarmingly like a raven skull tattoo I actually have, so can't complain about that. I got this mushroom head, possibly, eyes and maybe teeth on there. I got this gear with an eye on it. This one is just extremely long legs. I mean, I do tend to make a lot of lanky looking characters, so not too bad. We've got Mr. TV head, or CRT monitor head, I guess. And finally, the real kicker here, this chastity belt. I mean, what are you gonna do with a chastity belt? So I got 3 heads and no limbs, apart from the fact that the legs need to be long, I guess. But I was a bit stumped. I really wanted a concept or a theme. I didn't want to just Frankenstein things together. I just needed one good idea.
I'm an idea.
So after much deliberation and tea and staring at that cursed chastity belt, it hit me. There's really no way this thing can be taken seriously. So let's take that cursed card and use it for the basis for the story. So for the sake of YouTube, and please let my mom not watch this video, we're going to make a big, dangerous, scary monster. Oh, why am I like this? So the first card I had my eye on was the mushroom. In my mind I was envisioning a bit of a caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland vibe, but if instead he was a dungeon master, and instead of sitting on a mushroom he had a mushroom chaise longue.
Chaise longue.
To lie on. So using some foil and armature wire, I made enough mushroom shapes to accommodate a long-legged fellow and started covering them in super Sculpey. There's something about the fleshy tone of this clay that really adds to the ick factor of sculpting almost anything that isn't completely cuboid in shape. The drawing on the card seems to have these little flat pieces under the cap instead of normal gills. So we're going to create something a little bit in the middle. As with most of the things I make, I want this sculpture to have a bit more of an irregular look. I rarely want to craft anything with clean lines and perfect symmetry, and not just because that's hard, I do prefer how it looks, I promise. So using various sculpting tools, I blended in differing sizes and shapes of clay to the underside of the mushroom, and I used a needle tool to scribe in some of those gills. Now to make the holes for the scales, I used a ribbon tool and ball stylus to make some uneven dents in the cap, and we were nearly ready for our first bake. Before that though, our poor mushroom friend has, like many of us, lost their NHS dentist, so we need to do a little bit of oral hygiene first. Using the toothbrush and a rubber thimble, I gave the stem some texture, and with that I could bake them, ready to add on a thin sheet of clay over the top. And very important in this process is to forget to put on the bacon bond, then put the sheet back on top and blend it in. Trypophobia warning for anyone who has a fear of small holes. If it makes you feel any better, I forgot what the word for that phobia was and just googled it. Please don't do that. I don't recommend it. My dreams will be haunted by little holes forever now and just ugh. So moving swiftly on, I used some wormy dealies. Sorry, north of the border. Don't sue me. With some unnamed tubes of clay, I blended them in to give the mushroom a little lip on the cap, and then with a final brushing of clay softener, they were ready to bake. I painted the stems of the mushrooms in a sort of off-white beige colour, and for the caps I went with a slightly darker shade of the iconic, these are definitely poisonous, red. And now that we have something in the vague shape of a chaise longue, it was time to move on to the actual monster, the part we've all been waiting for. Because I didn't get any limb cards, I looked around for inspiration and found this guy. I must have started this thing about 5 years ago. I think I was following a tutorial, who knows, but evidently I gave up on him. He's a bit broken and unfinished, but unlike every influencer selling you a crypto scam, he deserves a second chance. I did feel a little bit cheaty using something I'd already made in this project, but I asked the others who said go for it, and spoiler alert, it actually took me longer to butcher it into what I needed than it probably would have taken for me to remake it from scratch, so I think it's okay. To go with our theme, I needed to repose our friend here into something a bit more appropriate, so with some extensive research done, I started by releasing him from his foot prison. I knew he would take a fair bit of damage in this process, but I tried to minimise it as much as I could. I really felt like all of those chiropractors on TikTok who are just out there breaking people's necks for funsies. Okay, you'll just feel a small pinch and... He may be a dungeon master for sure, but I also kind of see him as a bard for some reason, charming those who happen upon him laying across these mushrooms. I mean, there's definitely some bard spells I think he would benefit from. I used some super glue and baking soda to reattach his arms at a shorter length and to extend his legs out so that they fit the extremely long requirement. And bonus, if you're left with some crunchy little monster bits, they make a lovely topping for ice cream. Using bacon bond and some fresh clay, I started fixing up our wee pal here and filling in the gaps I'd made. I couldn't remember exactly how I made the texture on the original piece, but I'm assuming that I used a mixture of tools to carve away portions of the clay and adding little strips to build up the texture. One of the reasons I wanted to use this sculpture was the texture that I'd done previously. Although my original intention was, I think, some sort of sinewy stretched flesh, I think it could also work as a writhing body of cables and wires that could be right at home coming out of, say, a TV head. So to enhance that effect, I stuck some lengths of different coloured thin gauge wire into the ends of the legs and the fingertips, to look like the wires you see when cables get cut or frayed. And after a nice toasty bake, he came out like this. I don't know if it's because the clay was so old on the original sculpture. You can see the difference between the old and the new stuff, and the new stuff is absolutely fine. But to be honest, I think it looks kind of cool like this. I kind of wish I could leave it like that. Although the ends of the legs, I don't think I can show you on YouTube right now. I promise I didn't intend them to look like that. A brief trip back to the Mushroom Kingdom now to get the base started. I drilled them into the wood for some stability, so now it was time to get down and dirty with some Sculptamold. Mixing it with some water and a bit of brown paint, you want the kind of texture you can remember in your nightmares from school dinner semolina pudding. Mmm, tasty. I just slapped that all over the base and used a wet glove to smooth it out a little bit. On the cap, I used a little piece of sponge to paint the holes a very pale yellowy cream colour. I didn't want any clean lines, so I used the sponge to dab on the paint, and then I gave all the mushrooms a brown wash. Now, if you can remember, our mushroom card had some eyes on it, so we'd better add those as well. And you don't want to know what these eyes will see, but with some hot glue, their fates are sealed forever. I made a sandy mixture with some of the same paint from before to fill in the gaps, again being careful to avoid clean edges, and used a wet rag to wipe away the excess. I am flip-flopping around different parts of the project, but that is the life of a crafter when drying times are your enemy. Whilst I waited, I used PVA glue to add some flock to the base for a lightly grassy look. It's about time things came to a head, and of the three, we're going TV. I found this little dollhouse one and ripped out its innards and drilled a hole for the neck. I have this mould of a raven skull, which is just about the right size to fit inside of the TV, so I made a plaster casting. You could use resin, but I like plaster for this kind of thing. I painted the skeleton up with some skeleton horde, trying to pronounce the D in a video like this, and used some black paint for the beak. I wanted the inside of the TV to be covered in wires like the body, but I can't bake this thing, so it was time to turn to our old pal green stuff. Now, I do not like green stuff. I hate the texture and so haven't used it that much, which is probably why my green stuff is old and crusty. You can even see little hard bits that won't mix in. It was hurting my hands to roll out because it was that bad, and I even tried to put it through my clay extruder to make the wires. Do not recommend, that was a bad idea. After a bit of a battle, some sore fingers, and a mightily pissed off Scottish woman, there were enough wires to fill out the TV, and I even embedded some of these little gear charms to represent the gear eye card. I didn't want everything to be literal from the card, so I think between these and the eyes all over the mushroom, it's well represented enough. So it's finally time for...
a chastity belt?
Why yes, indeed. It was at this point that I realised I would have to bake this guy again because I refused to use any more green stuff. So I turned to some cosclay. This was my first time using cosclay and I loved it. If it ever stops being sold out in the UK again, I might switch to it as a clay of choice for future projects. I gave our guy a big nappy of clay, added some edge details and rivet holes. I pre-baked these segmented rods to make them easier to embed, and I made a little padlock to keep our warrior safe. Nothing sordid about it, thank you very much. On to the painting. And as much as I enjoy that he looks like when your dad's been entrusted to make your toast in the morning, he does need to look like he's been made of cables and wires. So I gave him a once over with black acrylic paint, although I did sneakily leave some of the burnt areas not fully covered for some colour variation. I mixed up a lighter grey colour and used it to dry brush all over the body. This picks up the high points on the model, and I think this step is where things start to come together and it looks a lot better. I chose some normal wire colours like red, blue and earth, and tried to carefully pick out a couple of wires around the body to highlight. I think this is what really started to sell it as a body made of wires, so I'm happy that I made the decision to do it, even if my unsteady hands made it very hard to keep on the lines. I wasn't able to film much of doing this part because I am what is known in Scotland as a specky.
They say Glasgow's full of specky bams, let's find out.
And so I had to have my face in front of where the camera would have been. So I did them off camera and added a black wash to kind of blend things in a little bit. Using Citadel's lead belcher, I undercoated the under armour. I used some black paint for inside the padlock, and then some wildwood contrast paint to start weathering it. I really do like the effect wildwood can have over some metallics. I then used some Ocean or typhus corrosion if you aren't a child who knocks their dinner over like apparently I am, but it gives a nice subtle rust effect. Lastly, I used some streaking grime because it just makes everything better. And don't forget about the back. The TV brain bits got the same black paint and grey dry brush treatment, and I went for a bit of a heavier rust on it. I mixed baking soda with a coppery colour. I didn't mind how bright this was because I knew I'd be going over it with so many other things that most of it wouldn't end up showing. Off camera I did some layers of washes, typhus corrosion and more wildwood, and here he is getting a little dry brush of Stormhost silver before I hot glued in the skull. The last little bit of painting to do was to give the now dry eyes a brown wash to pick up some of the sandy texture. Then I could finally attach the head to the body with a little bit of 5-minute epoxy for strength. Now for some finishing details. I made him a tasty beverage using this dollhouse glass and some UV resin tinted with alcohol ink for some red wine. I tried to keep it at a slightly jaunty angle whilst curing to make sure it would match how he was holding it, and a little bit of super glue was enough to keep it in his grasp. What is a dungeon master without accessories? Well, for ours, he doesn't have any D20s, but he does have a D-ring chest harness. Okay, that is an O-ring on there, but I only just thought of that joke now after I made the thing, so let me off, okay? I used EVA foam for the leather straps, which I painted black, used a needle tool to indent rivet holes, and eyelets painted in Stormhost silver to attach them, with a piece of wire for the ring. And how about some fashionable bracelets? He really loves to accessorise, what can I say? These were charms I found that I snapped off and glued some chain to. Now he does enjoy some extracurricular activities, so he needs a riding crop, because he's a keen amateur dressager equestrian. He rides f***ing posh horses, okay? This was made of clay and some armature wire. And finally, he does need to keep his mushroom home tidy, so something to sweep the floors with is necessary. Again, this was made of clay and some thin jewellery wire. With a couple last little safety measures to ensure everything's up to code, all we have left to do is glue him down in a pose that says, my safe word is prestidigitation. And so it was finally time to share our project. Oh,
This pose!
Why is it so sexy?
Why is this monster hitting on me?
On the second reveal, for people who missed the first one, Terran came out with a better description for this guy than even I could, so enjoy.
Like you get warped to this weird dimension at the end of reality, and he's just hanging out with his BDSM gear on mushrooms, just like, oh hi.
That's exactly what I want. And here he is, finally finished. I mean, it's an absolutely cursed abomination of a thing, but I kind of love it. I'm pretty happy with how he turned out. And he's probably the weirdest thing I've ever made, but let's be honest, they're probably just going to get weirder from here on out. So if that's what you're into, subscribe. I do just want to take a second and thank all of the amazing people that I've met throughout the course of this collaboration. Who knew you could actually make friends when you're an adult? You just sign up to weird stuff and it sort of works out. I mean, I feel like I've cracked the code that nobody knew the answer to before. But they are amazing people and there have been some incredible builds made. Most of them, I promise, are not as weird as this one, so please do check them out. There will be a link in the description below with the playlist of everyone's videos and some links to the other channels down there as well, so please do check them out. And extra special thank you to Terran for organising Monster Bash this year. They really put in the effort to wrangle all of us together and get this thing going, so definitely check out their video. It's one of my favourite builds and they really deserve a watch, so please check that out as well in that playlist that I mentioned below. And finally, thank you for watching the video. I mean, it's probably been a bit of an odd ride getting here, but thank you so much for making it this far into the video. I do really appreciate it. And let me know what you think about this guy, about the video, down in the comments below. I'm still trying to sort of find my style here on YouTube, so if you like these to camera bits, or if I should just go back to social anxiety land, do voiceovers, then let me know down below. I'm really not sure what I'm going to do at this point, so some feedback would really help. And of course, as always, I do really appreciate any likes and subscribes and sharing the video if you enjoyed it. That would really mean a lot to me as well. And as I mentioned, I have made a Patreon. I don't really expect anyone to subscribe to it at this point, but there is a free member option on there that's available. And I'd like to start a wee community on here in this little corner of the internet. So if you want to have a wee look, it is there for you. I will link that in the description as well. But enough of me talking now, I guess it's time for the glamour shots. But thank you so much for watching, it really does mean the world to me. And I will see you in the next video.